There's a piece of folklore that's been repeated so many times it's basically accepted as fact. If a nuclear war ever happens, humans won't survive it, but cockroaches will. They'll crawl out of the rubble, completely unbothered, ready to inherit the planet. Most people have heard some version of this. Almost nobody has actually asked whether it's true, and even fewer people know the real reason behind it, because the actual science is stranger and more specific than the myth suggests. Here's what almost nobody tells you. Cockroaches aren't invincible. Radiation absolutely can kill them. But compared to humans, and compared to almost every other animal on the planet, it takes an extraordinary amount more radiation to do it. And the reason has nothing to do with luck or some general toughness. It comes down to something happening inside their cells at a level most people never think about: cell division timing. And it's a mechanism so specific that scientists can actually calculate, almost to the exact dose, why cockroaches sit in an entirely different survival category than we do. But to understand why radiation barely touches a cockroach while it can devastate a human being, you first need to understand what radiation actually does to a living cell. Because most people think radiation is dangerous, the way fire is dangerous, that it simply burns or destroys tissue directly. That's not really how it works, not even close. Ionizing radiation, the kind released in nuclear events, damages living things primarily by breaking apart DNA, the molecule that contains the instructions every cell needs to function and reproduce. When radiation passes through a cell, it can shatter strands of DNA directly, or it can create unstable, reactive molecules inside the cell that go on to damage DNA indirectly. Either way, the result is the same: broken genetic instructions. Here's the critical detail almost nobody knows. DNA damage caused by radiation is at its absolute most dangerous during one specific moment: the instant a cell is actively dividing. When a cell splits into two new cells, it has to copy its entire DNA sequence precisely. If that DNA is damaged right as this copying process is happening, the errors get locked in, replicated, and passed forward. And this is the exact moment cell division catastrophically fails, leading to cell death on a massive scale. A cell that isn't actively dividing at the moment radiation hits, it has considerably more time and biological machinery available to detect the damage and repair it before anything catastrophic happens. This single fact, that actively dividing cells are dramatically more vulnerable to radiation than resting cells, is the foundation of the entire cockroach mystery, and once you understand it, the rest falls into place with almost mathematical precision. In humans, certain tissues are constantly, rapidly dividing around the clock. Bone marrow, which produces our blood cells, divides extremely fast. The lining of our intestines regenerates itself every few days, requiring constant rapid cell division. This is precisely why radiation sickness in humans devastates the blood system and the digestive tract first, because these are the tissues with the highest concentration of actively dividing cells at any given moment, giving radiation the maximum number of vulnerable targets to hit. Cockroaches are built completely differently, and the difference comes down to their life cycle. A cockroach's cells only divide when it's molting, shedding its exoskeleton to grow into the next stage of its life. And critically, a cockroach doesn't molt continuously. It molts in distinct, spaced-out cycles, sometimes going a week or more between molts, especially as it approaches adulthood. Outside of that narrow molting window, the vast majority of a cockroach's cells are sitting completely still, not dividing, not copying DNA, essentially in a biological standby state. Researchers at institutions studying insect radiation resistance, including work referenced by the American Institute of Biological Sciences and building on Cold War-era radiation studies, found that when cockroaches were irradiated while not in an active molting cycle, the percentage of their cells caught in that vulnerable dividing state at any given moment was dramatically lower than in a human body, where rapidly dividing tissue is present and active nearly all the time. Fewer dividing cells exposed at the moment of radiation exposure means dramatically less catastrophic, irreversible damage. The actual numbers involved are staggering by comparison. Studies have found that a radiation dose of around 6 to 10 gray is fatal to humans, a dose that would cause death within days to weeks, through catastrophic failure of the bone marrow and digestive lining. Cockroaches, by contrast, have been shown in laboratory studies to survive doses in the range of 100 gray, And some studies on specific cockroach species have recorded survival at doses approaching or exceeding 900 gray, a number that sounds almost unbelievable next to the human threshold, roughly 15 times higher at the lower comparison, and well over 100 times higher at the extreme end. And this brings us to a detail that actually undermines the popular version of the myth. Cockroaches are remarkably radiation resistant, but they are not the most radiation-resistant organism on the planet, not even close. That title belongs to an organism most people have never heard of, a microscopic creature called Deinococcus radiodurans, a bacterium so extraordinarily good at repairing shattered DNA that it can survive radiation doses in the thousands of gray, doses that would liquefy the DNA of almost anything else on Earth. Its nickname among microbiologists is literally Conan the bacterium, and it earned that reputation by demonstrating repair mechanisms so efficient that scientists still study it today for insights into DNA repair relevant to human cancer research. Even among insects, cockroaches aren't uniquely elite. Fruit flies, in some studies, have shown radiation tolerance in a similar or overlapping range, largely due to the exact same underlying mechanism, relatively slower and more compartmentalized cell division cycles compared to mammals. The cockroach became the face of radiation survival in pop culture, largely because of its reputation as an unkillable pest in everyday life, not because it holds any actual scientific record for radiation tolerance. So the popular myth gets the direction right, but the details wrong. Cockroaches genuinely would outlast humans in a high radiation scenario. That part holds up under real research. But the reason isn't some mystical toughness or an ancient survivor's advantage. It's a specific, almost mechanical quirk of biology, a slower, more intermittent cell division cycle that happens to leave fewer of their cells vulnerable at the exact moment radiation exposure occurs. This matters beyond the trivia value, because the same underlying principle, that actively dividing cells are the most vulnerable to radiation damage, is precisely the science behind why radiation therapy works as a cancer treatment in humans. Cancer cells divide rapidly and uncontrollably, which makes them unusually vulnerable to targeted radiation. The exact same mechanism that spares a resting cockroach cell is deliberately exploited in reverse to destroy a rapidly dividing tumor cell, while doctors work carefully to protect the patient's normal, more slowly dividing tissue around it. So the next time someone repeats the old line about cockroaches surviving a nuclear apocalypse while humanity doesn't, know that the myth is more accurate than most people realize, but for a reason that has nothing to do with the cockroach being tough, and everything to do with something as small and precise as when, exactly, its cells happen to be dividing at the moment the radiation hits.